Greetings from the Flying Reporter, and this is your June exclusive video monthly update. I'm off work today. I work 4 days a week for the BBC, so I get 3 days off in the week. So I'm off today. I'm actually working this weekend, so I've got a 4-day run coming up. Not particularly looking forward to that, but there we go. One has to pay the bills, doesn't one? So I thought I'd just update you on what's going on. Some of you will know a little bit about this because I've written about it in some of my newsletters, but I can go into a bit more detail. I'm going to talk to you about what I was planning to do today and I'm not able to do because of the weather. Obviously I've got a new video out at the moment which is about the weather school that Dr. Simon Keeling runs in Staffordshire. I've attended both parts of that course and it has been extremely useful. For example, I knew that today was extremely unlikely to be a flying day, probably I'd say a week ahead. So, that's pretty useful. That's a useful skill to now have. I'll talk about that in a minute. I've got a live video hangout coming at the 23rd of June that you're welcome to join. It isn't an exclusive one for members, this one. We're going to do it for the whole community, so I'll tell you about that. And I've got big plans for the beginning of July, so I'm going to go into detail about that. So let's talk about today first of all. I'm going to take you out into my garden and you can see what the weather is looking like at the moment. So rather cloudy up there, and in fact it's probably just about flyable right now. I'd say that cloud base is about 1,500 feet, something like that, I would imagine. I think at Red Hill, where I fly from, it's not as good as that at the moment, so we shan't be flying today. There's a lot of rain in the forecast. Lots of low cloud forecast and also some heavy rain and possibly thunderstorms later on. So we're not going to do a flight today. Today basically my single engine piston rating needs to be revalidated every 2 years. And that is coming up at the end of June. And you can revalidate one of two ways. You can revalidate by taking a test, or you can revalidate by experience. So if you have done in the last year of the 2 years that you have, that your rating is valid for, as long as you've flown 12 hours, 6 of which you were piloting command for, and you have done 12 takeoffs and landings in the last 12 months, then you can revalidate your single engine piston rating by experience. So I've done something like 30 odd hours this year, perhaps not as much as I would have done. We've had problems with the aircraft, as you know, in the last year, but I can revalidate by experience. But what I must do is I must have a 1 hour's training flight or 3 training flights that amount to an hour in that last year. And basically that's a bit of a checkout with an instructor. There's no strict rules on what that training flight must consist of. You can learn something new if you want. You can go and do some spin training or an instrument rating or whatever it is, as long as it's training in that last year of your 2-year rating validation, then you can put that down and get your license signed, send off a form, and you revalidate it then for another 2 years. I was going to do an hour with an instructor today. We were going to look at practice force landings, engine failures after takeoff, some stalls, and I wanted to do some joins into an uncontrolled aerodrome as well, those are all sort of weaknesses of mine or things that I need to brush up on. So we were going to do that today. We're not going to do it because of the weather. I'm booked in with an instructor on Monday and the weather certainly looks a lot better for Monday, so looking forward to that. New video came out for you on Sunday, and it's about a 10-minute video looking at Simon Keeling's weather school, and hopefully you've seen that by now. If not, check out your inbox or go onto your Patreon login or onto my website if you have a subscription on there, and you'll be able to see that video right now. And I have to say, this course has been absolutely brilliant. I can't praise it enough. I think you study your PPL meteorology when you're going for your license, and you do what you need to do, obviously, to pass the exams. And I studied it pretty diligently. and I passed my exams. But I suppose as time goes on, you start relying heavily on the TAFs and the MET-Rs, maybe having a quick look at the charts, but you don't really study them too much, and so therefore those skills get a little bit rusty. And also there's a lot of information out there which you're not taught how to use, and by going on this course I learnt new skills interpreting different types of charts, and so I am able to look at the charts now a week in advance and see where those flying windows are. And when I'm doing these longer trips, which I'm going to be talking about in a minute, this is going to be particularly crucial so that I can decide, a week in advance which route I'm going to go. There's no point heading south if in 3 days' time there's going to be a huge storm coming through there or a big low pressure system. I might want to think about going north instead. So you can make these sort of strategic decisions. So really, really useful stuff. It teaches you how to work out what the cloud bases and cloud tops are going to be. Really, really, really good. And I've put a taster of that in my video that's on the channel right now, so go and have a look at that. I know a lot of you have already. And that leads me on to our hangout, our live hangout, which will be on the 23rd of June at 1800 Zulu. So for those of you in the UK, that will be at 7 o'clock in the evening on the 23rd of June. Simon Keeling will be there to answer your questions, and we'll be going through some charts live, some current charts, and having a look at what we can learn from those charts and perhaps give you some hints and tips as well. We won't be going into massive detail because that kind of undermines what Simon does on his courses, but we're going to give you some ideas and some tips to perhaps whet your appetite. That will be on my Facebook page, so if you haven't liked my Facebook page and you're a Facebook member, then do that now. At some point soon I will be putting a link on there to show you where to go to. I'll also be sending out emails and notifications on Patreon and through my website to remind you about this in the week ahead, with a link of how you can access the live broadcast. And usually what I do is I embed the broadcast on my website. So for those of you who aren't Facebook members, hopefully you can go on my website and you can watch the live broadcast, if not necessarily ask questions. So that's the 23rd of June. Put a date in your diary, 7 o'clock in the evening. We'd love to have as many of you there as possible asking your questions and perhaps learning a little bit about the weather as well. Finally, turning to early July, and I have for the last year been wanting to do a long trip into Europe. In fact, I'd wanted to do it back in October, and we were about to do it when the engine was condemned on Oscar Romeo, so that put paid to that. And then we've had a few, I'd say, when did we get our engine back? I can't remember. It must have been a month or 6 weeks, maybe 2 months ago. On Oscar Romeo, and I've been obviously not wanting to go overseas with it because it's a new engine, and history shows us that you can sometimes have problems in the first few weeks, few hours of a new engine. Anyway, everything settled in very nicely with Oscar Romeo's engine, so I'm going to set off on a long trip. In fact, the long trip will do the engine an awful lot of good as well, getting it worn in nicely. We're going to try and head down to Spain, and this is something I wanted to do back in October. We're going to do it hopefully in July, weather permitting, and I'm going to just show you an idea of what I'm hoping to achieve. I've got my Sky Demon up here, and as you can see, that is essentially the route, heading from England down to western side of France, to northern Spain, and then all the way down to near sort of Barcelona, just to the west of Barcelona. I'm planning to sort of try and get down there in 2 days, and then come back heading east and then north, heading through the middle of France, back up to Deval to cross back into the UK. So that's basically the plan. Obviously I can reverse that if I want to, if the weather's not conducive to going that way, or we may have to do something completely different if, for instance, that isn't going to be possible. So just having a look at that in a bit more detail. Obviously this is all subject to change. I've got a bit more research to do on these aerodromes and their fees and their fuel availability and their customs and so on requirements. So there's quite a lot to read up on, but at the moment this is what it looks like. So heading out over the Isle of Wight, this is going to be the outbound leg, crossing over Cherbourg at the top there, and then the idea is to try and make that first leg all the way down to Nantes. So that's the initial plan. That's a 2.5 hour flight or so, depending on the winds. So I should be able to get down there and clear customs at Nantes and refuel. And then after lunch, the plan is to head south from Nantes to the east of La Rochelle, and then all the way down here to San Sebastian. So we'll cross into Spain. San Sebastian is the northeastern part of Spain. This route has got quite a lot, as you can see here. I mean, this is what's interesting about France, is you can see all these restricted areas down here and all this controlled airspace. Now, I'm hoping this isn't going to be a problem. I think this is all doable. All of this restricted airspace you can access, subject to approval from the various ATC. So I'm hoping we'll be able to get through that without any problem. There's some danger areas to the west going across the coast, and some restricted areas along there too. So I plan to come inland rather than come down the coast. I might speak to ATC on the way down and see if they'll let us track the coast down rather than coming inland through all that controlled airspace, because this is restricted here. As you can see, restricted area LFR 31A1. It's restricted every day up to flight level 195. So one might assume you can't go in there, but in France, usually restricted airspace, you can access it. There's a huge, great Bible of all of their restricted airspace, and obviously you look up the number in that Bible and it'll tell you what the restrictions are and whether you can get approval to enter it. I'm pretty sure all of this I can come through. So that's an interesting thing about flying in France. It looks really complicated on the chart, but actually in reality it's straightforward. So from San Sebastian, the plan is to basically head south, southeasterly. And you can see here that I've plotted a route that kind of takes me through the valley, and I'm going to be crossing the Pyrenees at the lowest point. This is the idea. As you can see, the lighter shaded area on the map here is lower ground. I think this, if I just have a look at the level that it says my minimum safety level, it's saying 5,000 feet. So there's one there, 6,000 feet. So the elevation goes up to about 6,000 feet, but that's much better than crossing over the real higher areas. And I've got a few diversion aerodromes along that route that I can take as well. If it's cav okay and there's no reason why I can't climb up high, I might take a direct routing. But obviously what I've done here is planned for the worst case scenario. And my plan is to go to this aerodrome here, which is called Castellon. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. I have one of my followers is based there, and we may be meeting up and then doing some flights together whilst down there. And then the route coming back will be probably along the to the north of Barcelona, crossing the coast near Girona, and then landing at Perpignan in the south of France to refuel, and then we'll cross up through Toulouse and all the way up here, crossing the Pyrenees again to Limoges. That's the current thinking. Again, this could all change and may pick a different aerodrome depending on availability, parking, fuel, that kind of thing. But I'll do that very much nearer the time. And then we'll overnight probably at Limoges and then do another 2-hour trek up to Deval. We'll clear customs at Deval and then cross back over to Redhill. And as you can see here, I've picked the shortest crossing by coming over to Le Touquet and crossing there. Depending on my level of confidence, I may make a more direct routing, but we'll see on the day. So that's pretty much what the route is, the proposed route. We'll have to, as I say, that could all change quite considerably. I may end up going on a tour of Scotland or something, who knows, but that's the thinking at the moment. So I'm planning on keeping you very closely updated on all of this through my exclusive updates that you get. Hopefully I'll be able to do video updates on the route as well, so you'll be getting those exclusively, and we should be making some pretty interesting videos out of the trip as well. Now, I am looking for a co-pilot to join me. Obviously I could do this on my own, but it would be nice to have someone with me to help me with the radio and the frequencies and checking out the restricted airspace as we approach it and so on, and just having a bit of company. I'm only asking my exclusive members if anyone wants to join me on the route. I've had a couple of offers already. None of them are confirmed yet. So if you are interested in joining me on what will be approximately a 7-day trip with a 3 or 4 day layover in Spain, then get in touch. You know how to do that through my website or through Patreon, and we can talk about that. I'm not proposing that there will be very much flying for you to do because there are difficulties with insurance and so on. It's not insurmountable, so if you're desperate to do some flying and you want to contribute to the costs and get a bit logged in Europe, then let me know, we can discuss that. But it's basically to help me along the route. So if you are interested, please do get in touch, and we shall talk about that and consider that. You'll be paying for your own accommodation and food, but apart from that, the trip will be at my cost. Great, well there's your update for June. I hope that was interesting for you, and I'll be back hopefully in July, and I'll be updating you on my week-long trip into Europe with any luck. See you soon.